What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Other Side. Obviously, where we bring you guests talking about lots of topics, whether it be from MMA, politics, car racing. My man Chris the Guru Hoekstra. Welcome, by the way, man. Where you been? America?
Yeah, man. Just got back. It's been a wild ride. It's great to be back here on the podcast again. And Dan, man, so much has been happening.
Yeah, but before we get on to your three guests, you went to the States.
Yeah.
Family.
Yep.
Jet boat riding.
Yeah. No, it was really good. Actually,
whilst we were working, you were having fun.
Not entirely. I was actually working most of the time myself. I actually am doing quite a bit of research and writing right now. I was actually in Chicago at Northwestern doing some bits, getting some specialist things, having my interest in U.S. foreign policy that I do. So actually, it was more actually business than recreation. But you know, I got to see my grandmother who turns 100 in a couple of months.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I don't say happy birthday to your grandma.
Yeah, man. Can't wait.
Well, this will come out near enough to her birthday.
Yeah.
Good. And we're going Dublin.
I know. Big news. Bama all the way.
Yeah.
What a show that's going to be. The
Irish
three
fans. Watch out. Have you got Irish in you?
No.
No. Neither have I. Iranian, Irish. It doesn't really work. But anyway.
A lot of things happen. A lot of travel happening. Yeah. It's a crazy world, isn't it, Dan?
It is. We got great news, crazy things to talk about. So without further ado, introduce your three guests.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, seeing that the world is such a varied and complex place with our travels, with our work, with our studies, we wanted to bring you guys a different topic today that would address perhaps a different vein of what it means to live in a globalized world. And today we're and today we're going to talk about challenges, complex security issues, past and present, in a whole different spectrum, from space to the internet to all of the wild things that you guys may or may not know a little bit about, and we're really looking forward to sharing them with you. So what I did was I brought along three people who are significantly more intelligent than me in every way.
And me, definitely me.
I've been so lucky, I think, and so humbled, with all sort of sarcasm aside, to be able to work along people that just inspire me every single day. And I thought, what better than having come from a background of working and teaching my whole life to going back to study, to find three other people who I've become friends with and also study alongside with, who have the same life experience, people who worked in jobs, people who had experiences before coming back to further their own education, much like myself. So before we get to our topics, I'd love to introduce our guests. And the man sitting to my right,
hello,
Mr. Asher Nathan.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Yeah, thanks for coming down.
It's all right.
Asher actually studies history as well, along me, with an interest in 20th century history.
Yep. Only nothing before 1900 bores the hell out of me.
Bunch of dudes marrying too many wives.
Yeah, it's just the more interesting. It's the more interesting century, isn't it?
Let's be honest. Yeah. Asher is a professional musician.
Yeah.
Just got done working on a what was it?
Well, no, I'm not done. I'm currently working on an advert, but let's not say too much about it because it might all go tits up, so you never know.
Okay, cool.
Can I say tits on this?
I don't know.
Is
probably.
that word?
We'll leave it to our producer. I'm sure
Okay.
we'll
Tits is
warning
all
sign on that.
But Asher and I met in the same program, and we've been friends ever since. And obviously, you've been involved in touring around with musicians.
I'm in a band. We're playing lots of gigs and stuff, which is hard work, but you know.
And you studied sociology before you came to history, is that correct?
Sociology many years ago, but now that's dead to me now. So now I'm just doing history, and hopefully a career will emerge somewhere out of the darkness.
A cushy career, right?
A career that pays me regularly. That's all I'm asking for.
You want to be in like a little field in America with some sheep hanging out,
No,
small little college, nice desk, a pipe, right?
I'm not leaving London ever.
Really?
Yeah.
North
definitely.
London boy?
North London.
Where are we right now?
We're in South. So somewhere in South, I don't know, there's trees and stuff. We don't really have that. I don't know where we are. You drove me somewhere.
We had a bag over his head, actually.
Yeah.
It was you know,
Like
security
top
guys.
secret.
Either way, you're fascinated with a lot of the things that I actually am very much interested in, Cold War.
Yeah.
And
We come from different angles, but that's cool.
We'll get there. Speaking of Cold War conflict, my man Kaneshko Sangar, Kaneshko and I actually met. Well, why don't you tell us how we met?
We met actually through a project we set up this year at SEAS, Platform Ukraine.
And CESE is like basically part of UCL where we all study. It's a school of...
Slavonic and East European Studies.
There we go. And Platform Ukraine, tell us about that, because that was an amazing, I think a very pivotal event in my own academic pursuits, but yeah.
Very short about Platform Ukraine because I think it's a significant issue to
Just
mention.
Google that shit, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, the website is cool. When all this mess, I would say, started in Ukraine, we tried to look at the mainstream media as academics and tried to set up a couple of minor events. But we figured out that actually everything what you read about Ukrainian crisis, whether it's on a mainstream media, whether it's on the website, on a university website, is all bullshit. Most of it. So we tried to somehow contribute to putting it straight and set up our project, which in the beginning was purely academic, but with time we managed to involve not only academics but other different kind of people who were involved on the ground, students, historians like Chris, and at the end we had our conference last month.
The 1 year anniversary conference.
Yeah, 1 year anniversary
which we worked together on.
We worked together actually, and this is how Chris helped us out with 1 or 2 panels, which was brilliant actually, and this is how we met.
Yeah, I mean, I chaired actually a panel on security challenges in post-Soviet space. Obviously, Ukraine was part of the former Soviet Union, and we're very interested in using it as a platform to discuss conflict in any area that's gone through communism. So, Konechko provides, I think, a unique expert opinion on Russian foreign policy is what you like to look at in any area that has gone through communism
And post-Soviet space.
and post-Soviet space. Yeah, currently working on condensing that thesis into a book. If those guys at Routledge will get back to you, right?
Exactly, yeah. It might take another couple of years, but
Publishers, huh?
Publishers.
And Konechko is a Dutch citizen who, by way of Afghanistan, correct?
Yes.
We'll come on to that later. We got a crazy thing. And final guest, who needs no introductions. Woohoo! Caitlin Egan.
Hi.
Caitlin, tell us a little bit about yourself because I think you've got a pretty crazy life story.
I am currently doing my master's at the Jill Dando Crime Science Institute at UCL, which is where I met Chris. I met him at Cyber Security Report launch at Canada House.
Yeah.
So I'm focusing my research on cybersecurity, cyber vulnerability and risk. I also work in defense and security for a company in the UK. Disclaimer, these views are my own, not my company's.
It sounds like someone who's got 100 years of New York Police Department in their bloodline.
Yes,
is that
I
right?
do. This is true. Actually, my great-grandfather was captain of the NYPD. So, yeah, I'm a dual citizen, dual US, dual... Okay.
So she sounds like me, but then a little bit different. It's all good. If he starts speaking Dutch, don't worry. If he starts dropping the Yiddish...
I don't speak Yiddish.
Moving back to Caitlin, though, I mean, we were at this UK-Canadian joint policy launch,
yeah.
and it was mind-bending, wasn't it? There was
Yeah.
so many aspects. I mean, people like, we need a Geneva Convention to control the internet.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's your space because you work in New Technologies Division, right?
Yeah, I do. The event was interesting. They had some very eminent professors on the panel discussing it. I didn't agree with everything they were saying.
And industry experts. I mean,
Yeah.
I rode the tube back with the former head of innovation from Microsoft UK.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
this dude was telling me all this crazy stuff. We'll get to all that, but back to what you do. You used to be associated with Q Branch, is that right? If you've seen James Bond and Q, you know what we're talking about. Tell us more about
The
that.
company used to be part of the Ministry of Defense, like the R&D division. So yeah, Q, the guy who used to give Bond his fancy pens and cars. They were privatized, and they do loads of really cool technology stuff, R&D. So yeah.
Can you tell us that?
We'll get to all that. We're going to get to all that. So to sort of sum things up, each of us brings a different perspective, whether it's the UCL Security Studies program, whether it's, I guess you are very much interdisciplinary, is that right, Konechko? All different angles of academia to look at foreign policy and security, history.
I'm here, like I said, as a guest tonight because my mind's already blown away by something. We haven't even got into anything.
Either way. You know, I have to go to our original idea of being able to look at a complex global world where so much is going on. And I'll never forget it, before I actually came back to study, after I'd finished my bachelor, I wrote an article in, I believe it was Foreign Affairs. And they used an acronym to describe the world that we lived in, because I'd always been fascinated. I mean, you know, my grandfather watched the news, I wanted to know what was going on. And it was a leading U.S. general, I believe, or someone along those lines in the Defense Department, said we live in a VUCA world, a world that is
VUCA.
VUCA, VUCA. And that stands for a world that is volatile, it's unpredictable, it's complicated, and it's often ambiguous, not as it seems. What do you guys think about that?
That's the way it's always been. Nothing has changed. I mean, it's more complex. The networks are more complex.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, computers, the internet, without getting too technical, has obviously shifted the way we interact with each other. But listen, in the Roman Empire, stuff was volatile. What was it? What else? What were the other things? Volatile.
Unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean,
but
these
people have
things-
argued that that's exponentially so, right? I mean, if you think about the fact that the long 19th century was maybe more stable economically than what we live in now.
But it was still, they had a lot of wars in the 19th century.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, keep going.
I think you always have, with history, you always have the benefit of hindsight, right? So things
Yeah.
seem clearer when you're looking back. But if you were a contemporary of any of the societies that you guys study, it would have VUCA would have, applied.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. I definitely think you have like these different layers now, to the complexities. I mean, you have the cyber realm, which never existed.
We were talking on the train. You think we live, and Konechko he was loving this one. I mean, we live in a third age, right? Went through agricultural revolution, right?
Yeah. Then
Where
the
people learned to settle and not live in a way that there was hunter-gatherer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the Industrial Revolution, which completely changed in an accelerated way of time and space that we live. And now,
Yeah, there's arguments that say we've had the information revolution, again, with the internet. And I don't know how they define revolution. I think it's about whether things act as a catalyst for industry and development, and industrialization did. And I would argue the internet and the World Wide Web and everything that goes with it has or is currently.
because 200 years ago, if you wanted to go anywhere, you had to walk, okay,
You got a horse,
or get on an
horse.
animal, or get pulled by an animal, right?
Uh-huh.
And remember the Shovelbush article we read on the train? Remember that thing? Do you remember that one? Anyways,
What?
but either way,
I don't
he
think I read
argued
this.
that basically, as society progressed, time and space sort of collapses as people now have been able to go more in a minute than they ever went before, more in 5 minutes, and obviously the information revolution allows more out of your time and place.
And it's affected everything. I mean,
More risk, more work.
satellites can monitor your GPS. When people say GPS, we throw it around, but it's it's a satellite system. And Europe's just launched its own one. We have Galileo now, so now people in Europe and the UK will be using Galileo, not GPS, which is pretty cool. But yeah, farming, tracking individuals, environmental monitoring. It's all done from space, connected to the internet. It's these incredible signal technology.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing that we've got more of this, in your opinion? I mean, some people argue, being able to be tracked and go everywhere, you've got no private life, etc. Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's the privacy security argument's never going to end. I think technology is neutral. It depends who's using it and who's abusing it, right?
Yeah, but how about that friend that texts you like 20 times a day, man? I hate that shit. I just turn my phone off, don't I mean? Like, I delete the Facebook app because I can't handle that. I just check it whenever I want to check it, do you know what I mean? Because I like being able to look at the trees in the distance rather than a screen 2 inches from my face. So there's
I'm similar. I'm a recluse, so I hate being harassed nonstop, and that's what comes with it. Like work emails, Jesus, they can contact you 24/7 now.
Yeah.
Especially the industry you're in.
But thinking about travel in I mean, Dan, you came here from Iran.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Konechko, you came here from Afghanistan, no?
I'm
What-
from Afghanistan. I went to Netherlands from there.
You went
Russia,
to
from Russia.
Netherlands first.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
And when did you leave?
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
For first time, I was 7.
So when was that?
It was in 92.
So around
Yes.
the time of the
When
post-war.
post-Soviet period when the pro-Soviet, pro-communist regime fell and the freedom fighters came in.
Okay.
The so-called
And your
military.
grandfather actually helped start the Communist Party. Is
My
it?
dad.
Your dad did.
Yes, my dad.
That's crazy. Now, for those of us, explain the situation. Obviously, Afghanistan was invaded 84, 85?
By Soviet 79.
79. Jesus, I was way off.
You're way off.
Sorry, man.
97.
We can edit that. Don't worry. We can edit that. Don't worry about this story.
Sorry.
Say that again.
So Afghanistan was invaded in
In
1979.
1979,
Yeah.
yes. But I would be a little bit. I wouldn't call it an invasion because this is where the ambivalence you mentioned earlier comes in. Where now we live in a certain world that this ambivalence is coming to both. We start to kind of noticing them. Those days, it was obvious that we know as an invasion, Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, but to what extent it was a real invasion, that is always a question, because there was a huge just say that in 1979 the Afghan government requested the Soviet regime for help, assistance to fight the Islamists for 13 times. After 13 times, the Soviet leadership actually agreed to send the forces to actually help the current Afghan government to fight the Islamists.
Which then obviously gave U.S. and so on, Western powers, reason to support the Mujahideen, correct?
Yes. So, and this, can we call this an invasion?
Great power politics?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that, so was it a constructed term because the West won effectively? So
And
did
after
the
the
West
Cold War,
construct
yeah.
this term invasion?
From the very beginning, in popular literature, in science, in political science, that was present from the very beginning. Even nowadays, when you read books, like even by contemporary Afghan writers, you see that they use the term invasion. They don't only use this constructed term, but they also provide a certain scenario of invasion, which is fiction.
I've heard it called an adventure before.
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was like, somebody told me like the Russian adventure in Afghanistan. But obviously that is a great point, because obviously it depends on which way you're looking at how you interpret the past in this case.
Right.
And how did that lead to then your exit and fleeing, I guess, the Taliban, correct? I mean,
No, we fled Mujahideen.
But eventually, did you
Taliban.
go back and then leave the Taliban? Because you were back in and out of Afghanistan.
Yes,
several
I was
times.
back, I was back actually when the United States invaded Afghanistan in 2001.
Invade?
Yeah. That was also. Can you call an invasion again? They took out the Taliban, while an invasion that was supported by 80% of population.
Would you call it a regime change?
Not exactly.
No.
I don't think it was a regime change. It was. I don't know what the term be there. To trying to put a new regime, but not change the current, because Taliban, you can't call Taliban
Sure.
a regime. Yes.
Afghanistan is pretty much like one major city, right? Kabul, and then warlords and other sort of segmented.
By that time, it was divided into several segments where every province was controlled by a certain warlord.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fundamentally flawed from the start. The whole point of the program was irrational, do you think?
The US?
Yeah.
It was rational, but the problem is, the question actually is, what United States wanted to achieve in Afghanistan.
Particularly in the aftermath, right? How would it play out afterwards?
They
Which
just
is what we're
wanted
looking
to
at
get
now.
payback, no, for 9/11. That was what it was about. It was
well-
like, come on. This is my view. Me and Chris talk about this a lot at college. It's
At
because-
college, back when I was a British schoolboy, the headmaster brought me into his room and gave me a good caning.
What would you call it? University? College. It's the University
College is
College
like undergrad,
London.
right? Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay,
sorry.
whatever. It's because you're an American.
Back in secondary school, at college, A-levels. So for all those watching, the British have some funky terms for schools. College is like high school, and sometimes A-levels.
No.
Can it be?
College is college.
Into first
It's
year.
University
Senior year.
College London.
Junior, senior.
But there's
Back in
college, like
American.
sixth form colleges
Yeah,
here.
that's
Like
a
this
six-
is a sixth form college here.
We're in a
It's like junior, senior year in high school.
All right, back to Ash's point. Sorry.
We tend to differ quite a lot, even though you're not you reside in London. You're a kind of semi-British person now, I guess. Your friends are British, but yet deep-rooted, you're an American. You're doing your dissertation on America, and I'm kind of, interested in American history, fascinated, but I'm quite critical of America.
I'm
and
actually
we have
looking at
lots
US
of debates about
Yeah,
it.
I'm looking at U.S. foreign policy as a matter of not from just a U.S. perspective, though, right? So I mean,
But do you think are you into the idea of America? This is what I'm trying to get at.
What do you mean?
The idea of America, the
Can you
dream
define
of America.
The idea. From
Well, whatever, it can be a
Your
personal
American
thing,
dream.
it could be whatever you want it to be. But like for
As in the American dream, or like
well, just
Economically.
whatever people's dream of America is, because everyone seems to have a different one. For some people, it's like this place where I can earn
I
loads
think-
of money. For
yeah.
other
Yeah.
people, it's like
I-
freedom.
I think I think since Jamestown 1607, you know, everyone's seen Pocahontas if you've seen the movie. Virginia Company, right? We've been a system in a land of free and unfree. You know what I mean? There's been indentured servants. There was, you know, before slavery was even popular. I mean, there's always been a system of haves and have-nots in the way that America was colonized. From that perspective, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's awful.
No, not at
I'm
all.
joking
It's a
with
very,
it.
it's a cultural melting pot.
dichotomy. My dad has always said America is the land of extremes. You know, on the one
Absolutely.
hand, you have one of the biggest Christian revivalist movements out there. Then you have like the biggest pornographic industry in the world. You have some of the biggest green environmental movements. America is also one of the biggest polluters. You know, so it's a very interesting place. It's a nation of immigrants. You know. It's a fascinating case study for the 20th century.
Talking about the age of extremes, I mean, I was going to ask you guys all this because we all do, to a degree, have some expertise in the 20th century. You know, I remember World War One. You know, an event that many maybe and people don't realize this would have never seen coming because you're in the wake of an age where there was incredible prosperity and incredible stability to a degree, right? Some
And a lot of rivalry.
a lot of rivalry. I get that, yeah, but there was at least some stability. You know. People said beyond that, then there was an age of extremes. And when we saw the 20 years crisis, the EHR called it, you know, 1919, after a faulty treaty at the end of the war, to 39 with the invasion of Poland. The rise of National Socialism, the rise of fascism, the rise of ultranationalism, you know, extremes. And now these societies are probably anything but, you know. Japan doesn't, well, I guess they're starting to get a military now, but why did that, you know, it's strange how that did not continue to present day. Like Germany is the most stable
Well,
economy in
I
Europe.
want to just make this point that I feel like we are undergoing a similar process right now.
In Britain or
No, in the world.
in the world?
Like,
Yeah, I'd agree.
think,
I'd agree. We'll come back to that.
In the post 9/11 world, yeah, I think that we are returning to that age of extremes.
Yeah.
And what was beautiful, I suppose, that came out at the end of the Second World War was like this feeling like we don't want to go through this horrible 50 years ever, 40 years ever again. And a lot of beautiful things like the welfare state in Britain and the NHS came out of those things. And unfortunately, we humans have a very short memory and we forget this, the good stuff. And we forget the lessons we should have learned 100 years ago. You know, for example, the financial crisis, which is an exact replication of what happened in 29.
Totally.
And yet,
Shout out to Bernhard Rieger. If you're watching this, did he not break that down?
Will he be watching this?
I hope so. I love that guy.
But
Yeah.
don't you also think, I don't know, I mean, equally, post-World War II, yeah, people didn't want it to happen again, but you had Yalta and then you had, you know, the Soviet Union going and
Awesome.
breaking all its agreements,
Absolutely.
you know, invading Eastern Europe. And equally, with like the welfare state and stuff, I think that's been a longer term development. Like I was reading some stuff saying that it originated in the Victorian era when industrialization created this urban poverty that hadn't existed in the UK before. And the Victorian society suddenly had to like face its own demons and started bringing in new laws for compulsory education and free healthcare. So I don't know, I think that was a longer term development. I don't think like the war necessarily acted as a catalyst, but we certainly started building up more of the state post then.
But maybe as a rupture in the processes of globalization, do you know what I mean? Obviously, it was a global war. I mean, I
Yeah.
forget like 70 or 80 million people
Which
crossed
one?
borders.
Which one are we talking
World War
about?
One. World War One. Like 70 or so million people crossed borders because of the war. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not necessarily because they fought, but because of the consequences of what occurred. You know, Britain. I think before the war, around half of all world trade traveled in British hulls.
Yeah. We had
Chew on that one for a minute.
We had
okay?
Empire soldiers fighting, you know.
For
when
sure.
you go to Belgium and look at all the graves, I mean, international.
And that would never be the same again because after the war it was something like 20 or 25%, less than a third, because other routes, other globalized shipping routes developed, right? Because of the interactions that had happened because of World War One. You know, so if you think about the age of extremes, how that's come to what we see today through the information age and so on, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it's a weird paradigm. I mean, what do you wish people? Go on. Sorry.
And I think the age of extremes, I don't know, if you take the starting point 1914, when it started, it never finished in my opinion.
Never.
It carried on.
Okay.
For me, I mean, of course we have the First World War and we have Second World War, but for me it was one World War.
Mm-hmm.
I
From-
agree.
From 1914 to 1945, it was one world war.
Yeah.
And then you had, in 45 you had, to me it's always like, you know in those movies when the guy wakes up in a hotel room, there are 3 dead prostitutes and a lot of coke on the table, and he's like, what the fuck I did? What's going on? To me, world woke up in 1945 and this time.
Yeah.
And like, wait a minute, we allowed to gas 6 million women and children only because they were Jewish. Other than 100 million that died and 30 million in Russia.
Sure. Yeah. Most people don't realize how many
Yes.
people that Stalin killed,
Exactly.
or Mao that killed minimum 40,
Yeah.
more like 60 to 80.
And the civilian casualties in China as well. I think they had the highest. Don't quote me. I think they had the highest civilian casualties
Yep.
in World War
Yep,
II.
yep, yep.
Yes.
I mean, people talk about the 6 million Jews the Nazis killed, but they killed 12 million people. You know, they're responsible for the deaths of 12 million people.
They-
you know,
The United States dropped the nuclear
sure.
bomb just
True.
because they wanted, just because there wasn't any specific reason. I think they
You don't
won.
think so?
No, I
Yes,
think
I think that's
it was to
debatable.
show.
I
it
think
was
that's
to
debatable.
show- It was to show
We'll
the
come on to that, we'll
Russians
talk about
who's the
nuclear
boss,
weapons in a
who's the daddy.
We'll get to nukes in a minute, but I mean, if you think about it,
yeah,
the
Chris,
official.
Chris loves nuclear.
I love nukes, yeah. If we talk, and so do you, I'm sure. But if we talk about the calculations of what a full invasion of Japan would have taken, it would have cost at least 1 million lives. At least.
Okay, wait, hold on. It's not black and white, is it? It's not. I agree.
I love
I
this guy,
agree.
man. This guy is
but seriously, like, come on, it wasn't black and white. It was both like a coordinated plan, part of a coordinated plan,
Yeah.
but it was also part of a big PR strategy.
Sure. I mean, if you think about Paperclip, where they yoinked all the Nazi scientists that helped them develop this, you know, Oppenheimer and Goddard, even rocketry, or Einstein, you know. But you think it,
wasn't a Nazi.
No, but by that time,
no,
Japan.
no. He wasn't. No, but my point is that he was a scientist that was working under that regime. All right, but back to the point. I guess it goes back to what Caitlin was saying with Yalta and Potsdam. Good old Uncle Joe wasn't good anymore, really, was he? So to drop the weapon was it you think to flex the muscles, the atomic might?
Flex the muscles. There were several reasons to figure out whether it works actually, whether we can do that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I've been to Ground Zero at the White Sands Missile Range where they actually tested the first device.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
Where's that?
White Sands Missile Range is in Nevada and the Mojave Desert, I think.
Yeah.
It's
A lot of spaceport development there now, like
Yeah.
space companies.
Area 51, right?
Because there's a lot of space. And not a lot,
But
not a
I've-
lot else.
I remember the first book that came out after the dropping of the bomb by Gar Alperovitz, I think, that claimed it was for political reasons, which is the first revision of that, right? That it wasn't just to end
Show
the
the
war.
Russians. What is that? What he was
Absolutely.
arguing?
Because as you said, by the end of the war, good old Uncle Joe Stalin wasn't so cool anymore, was he? You know, most people forget he was an ally.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right, let's swap topics. Let's talk
We're
about
moving on.
let's talk about extradition. I got a crazy one for you guys. So I read a news article the other day that was talking about this phenomena that perhaps everyone can be safe somehow in the world if you have enough money or enough connections, and perhaps that no one's safe because of the technology that exists. And it compared what's happened recently with the killing of Cecil Lyon, where a young man by the name of, I can't remember, I'm a dentist from Minnesota, whatever I'll call him, paid $50,000 to kill a lion in Zimbabwe and accidentally shot Cecil, the most important one in that country. Now the Zimbabwe government wants him extradited to face crime charges. Yeah?
Yeah.
Also, not too long ago, for the second time, a man by the name of Chapo Guzman escaped in Mexico, which is, I think, a pretty bizarre story.
That is.
It's crazy. If you haven't Googled it, check it out. He's worth $1 billion at least. He's probably the most valuable and powerful criminal in the world, head of the Sinaloa cartel. And for the second time, he escaped in a laundry basket. The first escaped the most maximum security prison in Mexico.
Without anyone seeing him, anything, through a tunnel, motorbike ready to go.
It's definitely inside job.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that. But the USA wanted him extradited. After he was captured the second time, said, look, this guy's not getting away. And like you said, Caitlin, it's very rare the USA ever has to extradite somebody out. They're usually pulling people in, right?
So he's a Mexican citizen
Mhm.
who
Yeah.
escaped a Mexican prison
Mhm.
in
For the
Mexico.
second time. Yeah, and
So what's
he
he gonna
tunneled
do in
out. He
America?
tunneled out. The tunnel went like 1,500 feet under this prison, full electricity, full ventilation, a motorbike,
Yeah.
and nobody knows where he is.
Yeah.
But
But-
what's that got to do with
The
America?
Sinaloa cartel is like one of the most notorious violent gang criminal organizations out there.
Right.
Primarily, they make money off drugs.
Uh-huh.
They have a lot of activity in the US. You know, the smuggling routes and.
But the point is, Al Guzman's probably caught tons of people out of prison before. He's worth so much. 17 guards have been arrested in the prison, by the way, now. So my point being, if you have enough money, you can do anything, right? If you have enough money, you know, I don't think this dentist is going to get extradited, is he? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But perhaps no one's safe because of the technology now that we can prove that, you know, someone's done something.
I want to make the point that I don't know about. Personally, I'm not a lawyer. I feel like extradition
That's
feels
what I was
like a
gonna say.
Like a
really
legal.
it's a distinctive legal term that I think none of us really understand. We can talk about the morality of what happened. I mean, personally, like this story, I didn't know this story until you just told me.
But Al Guzman?
Yeah, until you told me it like half an hour ago. But I think it seems pretty weird that like he's a Mexican citizen in a Mexican prison. I don't get why America.
He's an international criminal.
What? Okay.
And his prime
Is he
prime
wanted
area
for
of
crimes
operation.
in America?
Totally, yeah, absolutely, as you were saying,
He
right?
Yeah.
has
It's one of the
tunnels,
most
doesn't
important.
he? He has tunnels
Tunnels.
down in. It's crazy. I mean, I was watching
Across
a
the border.
documentary. Yeah, watching documentary on it. How the hell? I mean, the people he must have working for him to obviously build them tunnels to go through, and the amount of stuff that goes through them tunnels. I mean, they were chasing him for years to get him, and when they did, obviously, you know, especially now he's escaped through down a shower hole, I believe it was. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Go check it out. If you haven't seen the pictures, they're
there's a
one of the-
documentary. There's a 10-minute documentary on YouTube.
Mm. I mean, but I think there's a wider thing at stake of international law in this case, right? You're an international criminal. He's a national hero, mind you. That's just probably why he's surviving internally.
And a lot of Mexicans love him, but a lot of Mexicans love him because the rumor is, you know, he gives his wealth to the poor people.
He's a
you
Robin
know,
Hood.
Yeah, exactly. And you know,
But then you look at the dentist, who's probably not like that, and he gets a pretty bad rep, you know, because the asshole shot a lion that everyone loves. But I think there's a wider question
but
there.
you even have your mate Arnold saying, "Let's extradite him." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Did Arnold say that?
Yeah.
What were you going to say,
Yeah.
Commissioner, sir?
In those instances, international law works one-sided, usually on side of United States when it comes to extradition.
Mhm.
US never extradites to any other country, but
No.
all other countries are obliged to extradite.
Unless
And
you're
we can-
Snowden, right?
Yes, we can see very clearly how hegemony works in this instance.
Explain.
Might need to
Explain.
explain
To
hegemony.
explain hegemony.
But
I didn't know it until this year, I must
I
admit.
use the word a lot, and
You love it.
everyone starts falling
Oh,
asleep
okay.
when I say it.
If you could explain.
Me, I don't want to. I think
You go,
You're a
Commissioner. Come on, you're the
PhD
most qualified man here.
I don't have a definition of hegemony, but to try to explain how an influence, basically,
Yeah.
how one powerful state can make other states to do what it wants to do. It's kind of power.
Could be a regional hegemon.
Could be regional hegemon, could be world hegemon. And in this, and we never really know why small countries give up to bigger countries, to hegemons, and why
Well,
they...
if you're a realist, you know.
Yeah. if
Money.
you're realist, money.
Money, usually.
Money.
Yeah, investment,
military power.
loans.
Military power. In this
Well,
instance,
yeah.
Sanction
why
removal.
Netherlands always
What'd
extradite...
you say, Caitlin? Sorry?
Sanction removal because it's
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
pertinent
Where
right
to
now
the-
with Iran.
Yeah. We'll get to that. We'll get to
Yeah.
that. But go on, Commissioner.
Why, for instance, Netherlands would extradite someone to United States, while United States would never extradite someone to Netherlands?
Yeah.
Because that's clearly we see how this hegemony works. Because Netherlands, it's not that someone from U.S. State Department calls, hey, you have to extradite the guy, or we will. No, somehow the Netherlands government feel obliged to extradite because
They feel almost coerced.
they feel, of course, yes. Yeah, and this shows how hegemony works. And United States as hegemon, it would always...
There's no way that
it
Dennis
could-
is going to Zimbabwe, is there?
No way.
No way.
No way.
No, that dentist is going.
And there's no way Al Guzman's going to go back to Mexican prison because if you want to talk about his wealth, I reckon he's got more influence than, for example, obviously these 17 prison guards who've been arrested, the police. I mean, it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
That's organised crime, which is like it's pretty far out stuff that I think like we can read a lot of books about it and we can attempt to like try and figure it out, but unless maybe you've been on the inside and like a part of these power structures that go on, I don't think
That's
any
your
of
job,
us
Caitlin.
can understand.
That's what you guys do. I mean, that's what
Yeah,
Secret
yeah.
does. UCL has a new department with millions in funding, and you
Yeah.
guys all work with scientific methods.
It's it's very much applied, so it's practitioner focused.
Yep.
It's focused on intervention. Like criminology traditionally like theorizes crime, like why does crime happen? Our department tries to like prevent it, right? So understand the crime and then get involved. So there's a lot of different theories on organized crime, a lot of practitioners on my course working on it.
Rather than talk about a bunch of ridiculous theory,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because it's very much armchair analysis. It's relevant, theory's relevant, but when you're a practitioner, you need to know prevention, right? You're accountable to whatever agency you work for, which is often taxpayer funded. You know, you need results. And it can be anything from organised crime to small things like bike theft in London, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Who funds the course? Do you know?
the British government's given it some money, lots of different grants.
But you know,
from
when
various-
you say the British government, is it MOD, I wonder, or some?
It's a variety of. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And the professors, they're very cool. You can look them up. They're constantly winning grants for different security and
Very
crime
well
issues.
funded.
Yeah, and it covers everything from forensics to.
Yeah, I was kind of interested to know who was funding the
Yeah.
course.
Dan?
Is it a new course?
It's
So weird.
yeah. Sorry, you can edit some of this out.
Yeah.
It used to. It's still people call it the Jill Daniel Institute. Do you remember Jill
Yeah,
Daniel?
yeah, of course.
So it was set up just after her death.
I remember that.
But it's progressed, and as security's become more of an issue, it's got more funding, become more established. It's interesting.
Dan, why don't you, and then we'll...
No, I just wanted to get your opinion. The other day we were talking about the dentist who shot the lion, and you said you could see why he done it, and you know some people were outraged about it, the fact that he's gone there, thinks he's got a bit of money, he's paid someone, and it's happened, and you used the word accidentally. Was it an accident, or did he? Because at the end of the day, if I don't know the full story, if they've given money to the people, and I think your view was they need the money as well.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand there's a wider issue here about the welfare and sustainability of natural resources. And a lot of people will say, and I'm not saying this because I'm pro-hunting or pro-guns or whatever, but I do live in a country where there's a gun for every American, right? So hunting in Michigan in particular is very popular where I'm from. I mean, deer hunting, if they didn't do it, the population would be out of control. I mean, we hit so many deers every year because hunters, in certain areas aren't going and doing what they know they should be doing. And you have to pay for tags, but that money gets used for conservation of the ecosystem. And the point about Zimbabwe is you're looking at many of these governments in Africa that don't have enough money to pay for the administration requirements and more importantly, conservation requirements of their natural resources. So that's why you can pay 50 grand to go and kill an animal, but that money is going to go in and actually help out maintain the other wider elements of the natural resources. So obviously what happened, I think, is questionable from a legal sense of whether or not they lured this animal out, right, Asher? I mean, you were...
No, I mean, clearly wrongdoing occurred.
Somehow.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it is it's symptomatic of what happens. A story gets sensationalized or becomes huge in the front page tabloid media.
Yeah.
And
Memes.
people focus on that tiny minute detail, which is this one dude killing this really cool lion. I don't know, he was like had a chip in his neck and science was loving it or whatever. But the fact is, like you're saying, there's wider issues at play, and they are the real cause.
Absolutely.
They are the real root of the problem. And that is symptomatic of so many things, like our perspective of what's going on in Ukraine, for example. Like I know something you're interested in is dominated by this personal rivalry about, because we don't like Putin because he looks like a muscle man, he looks like ex-KGB, so we're a bit scared of him. So we hate the Russians. But it's probably a two-sided story. I don't know much about it, being honest. And that is the way that these things are often portrayed. I think the guy was obviously a bit of an idiot,
I mean, you can say that you disagree with like big game hunting from a sport perspective. I do. I think it's ridiculous to shoot an animal just to put its head on a wall. But going hunting a year's worth of venison, I know plenty of people who do, and they're very, very ecological in their perspective in making sure they do it completely ethically and obviously more importantly legally.
I don't think it's about hunting. I think it's a similar thing to horse meat.
But my point is many people are making it about the fact that the asshole just shot someone. Absolutely.
Okay.
They can't believe it. Like, okay, it's only fair if the lion can shoot back.
I think it was because it was a lion. I think it was because it was
Really?
a lie. I think it was the same story as when horse meat scandal came out. Was that last year?
Oh
Was
yeah.
it last year or the year
And
before?
also the dog festival in China.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay,
That's
but
outrageous.
in,
Yeah.
in France they love eating roast horse or like horse steak. It's a massive thing. It's delicious. Horse is really good. You can eat it in France everywhere. It's not an issue. It's just a cultural psyche that we've developed. Oh, the
Yeah.
pretty
It's
little
funny
horse.
when you say about people not seeing the wider picture. Again, that's the
It's symptomatic of,
But-
of socioeconomic problems. I mean, people don't seem to consider the fact that there are other issues of, for example, like of living in a third world country.
But
That
isn't it funny though how again social media really takes people like, do you know what I mean?
yeah, let's
People
talk
just
about
zoned in and
let's
that's
talk about
it.
people dying from malaria, for example, in these countries. Do you know what I mean? People are worried about AIDS in Africa. Let's talk about malaria.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is unbelievable.
But social media has changed things, right?
Yeah,
For
completely.
good and bad.
Back to our original point. You know what I mean?
But I just think media plays on emotion, right? So back to like even extradition, you know, that's a legal issue as we were saying. So none of us being lawyers, I can't really comment too much on it. But the extradition issue often feeds into emotions in the media, right? Like, yeah, should we? No, shouldn't we? Yeah, that evil Dennis, he should be extradited, you know?
And because they got 275,000 signatures, they're going to have to actually address it, the request, you know, because that'll have to be going from this petition to
Yeah.
be looked at. It's crazy. So let's talk about gun control. I'm completely fascinated by a statistic I read a couple days ago that the people in Norway, where firearm ownership is very popular, haven't had to deal with police killing anybody in 10 years. Okay? Yet in the last 200 or so days in the U.S., we've had approximately 200 mass shootings where they count on the fact that 3 or more people were shot. Not necessarily fatally, but, you know, at least involved in gun violence. There's a gun for every American. There's 300 million guns at least in America. What is your opinion on that situation? Caitlin, I'm going to ask you first because you are part American.
Yeah. Listen, it's obviously I didn't really grow up there. My dad, I discuss a lot with him because he has a different perspective, right? He grew up in Brooklyn in Texas.
Is he a policeman?
No, he was not. He worked for the U.S. government for a bit, and then he went private. So
Okay.
he's been more of an analyst,
Okay.
that side of things. But he remembers when he was a kid, like, yeah, sure, guns were a thing, but it wasn't like a big deal, you know? Now it's a big discussion point. And what scared him was going back to Texas and seeing posters in some cafes, just local cafes, saying, we support the right to bear arms, and in fact, we encourage it to support our Constitution. So not just like we support the Constitution, but we actually support your right to carry a gun in this cafe, right? And he goes, it's just escalated. It's a whole different level now. My personal opinion, I don't think it's a good thing. No, I don't think gun ownership.
Because the typical argument you hear from law enforcement is like, well, it doesn't really matter because the bad guys are going to get it anyways. But then there's the argument of like, well, what about the normal guy who just gets a little crazy one evening, his girlfriend texts him, I don't think I like you anymore, and goes shoots 10 people in a movie theater.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
and
mean?
also that the accessibility to it. For example, the US is actually the biggest exporter of guns to the UK.
Absolutely.
Our law enforcement agencies have to work a lot together because they're illegal in the UK, right?
Absolutely. And where does most of Mexico's guns come from?
The
From
US.
us. From us. People and drugs go north, guns go south.
Yeah.
That's the number one
That's the
thing.
big issue,
Crazy,
you know?
I mean, you grew up in a country where I think the most widely produced firearm of all time is probably fairly common.
There are weapons in every house, indeed, in Afghanistan.
The Kalashnikov, yeah?
Kalashnikov and
How many
mostly
were available at the
Russian
time? I can't
guns.
remember. It's crazy.
It's a lot, but no, you have to consider, but because Kalashnikovs were made not only in Russia, but in
Of course.
the entire former Soviet Union. The Kalashnikov made in Czech Republic are
Yeah.
very good. Bulgarians are very good ones. So in that sense, you really can't know
Yeah.
exactly how many of them are made. But well, to come back to comparing US to Afghanistan, which is very strange. I never remember in Afghanistan a student entering school and shooting at people.
Mm.
While I see this on news constantly happening in the United States. And this is another question I always ask myself. How come that I understand this constitution and tradition, but guns have become such a strong part of US identity, entrenched into this culture. And many Americans can't really imagine America without those
Without guns.
without
And
guns.
even
It's
like
like glorified, don't you think? Where in a certain way, you see it like whether you see it in movies, whether you see it on music videos, whether it will be online videos, YouTube
Maybe that's
videos.
just because American media dominates. Is I mean, one of the biggest globalized exports ever. You know, you talk about McDonald's being everywhere. Well, American media, American video games, right?
Just a quick question, I'm not sure before, but what's the age limit of having a gun in America? Or does it depend on the states?
It depends.
State,
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you know, there are certain federal requirements that require registration of weapons, but for example, the amount of time. Some states you can walk into a store, right, and get a gun off the shelf. Some states you have to walk in, fill out paperwork, and then show up like 2 weeks later and actually pick it up because it takes time to clear, right?
Okay,
To prevent the crazy asshole
Go
from
down
going like,
Mexico and pick a gun up and bring it back, yeah?
oh, I don't know about that, but to prevent the crazy guy from saying, I want to buy a gun and kill someone today, at least it gives him 2 weeks to think about it, do you know what I mean? Or
2 weeks to kill him.
Do you know what I mean? 2 weeks to think about it, right? So there's a lot of things like that. I mean, but you, I know, you're fascinated with the militarization of police, aren't you?
Well, you know, we had a big conversation, I remember, in the refectory one lunchtime after class about this very issue.
Yeah.
And I have a thesis, but it's
Let's hear
unproven.
it. Let's hear it. Let's
And
hear your
it
theses.
definitely requires more. It definitely requires more work, research. I think what happened is this. After the Second World War, you know, America lived through this age of kind of economic prosperity, and everything was really good for a while. And then
Suburbia, right?
And then you had this age where in the 80s where everything kind of went to excess. And you, similarly, at the same time, you had a growth of the neoconservative movement in America, who is based on, you know, fundamentally bases their work on the philosopher Leo Strauss, who's a very important philosopher, and not a lot of people have heard of him, which makes him an important area of study, I think.
So you're talking about neocons, like say before Bush administration?
Yeah, well,
Like
in the Reagan administration, there was a lot of neoconservatives.
Yep. But
And
most people would assume that neoconservatism is
It's
George
like
Bush.
George W. Bush.
But it's not.
way
It's actually much older.
predates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way predates.
Guys like Rumsfeld and guys like Paul Wolfowitz had.
Rumsfeld was in the Reagan administration.
Yep.
Now Leo Strauss advocates this kind of retelling of American history in this glorified manner. He encourages the telling of stories, of fantasies, to give America a history that people can rally around, and which resonated really strongly in 9/11, and it was why the neoconservatives were able to get back into power after the Clinton era, was because it enabled a narrative, a story to be told that would speak to the American public. And I think one of those stories is this Second Amendment thing, is this that we have the right to bear arms, is one of these ridiculous parts of the American narrative that, like, America is founded and these laws cannot be changed. They're like this gods, man. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution is like a god in America.
Sure. Like visions of Lexington and Concord, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the first, yeah.
That's super interesting, and
That's my thesis.
No,
unproven.
but you could compare it, because just looking at other states, new states like Turkey, like Ataturk, who's the father of Turkey.
For sure.
They relied on creating this
Completely.
alternative history, this sort of fantasized, exaggerated version.
Which they've taken a step back from now,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
With the
yeah.
current
They're now
government.
sort of rebelling against that.
Which is crazy, because you think how forward-thinking that was. I mean,
Yeah.
and for a country that, I don't know, compared to some other countries that are predominantly Muslim, 99%
Yeah.
Muslim, do you know what I mean? They were very forward-thinking, and then
Yeah, yeah.
they've gone sort of like step back.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well,
I mean,
back and forward is a relative term, but anyway, let's not.
as
get
far as
into
being
that.
progressive, right? As
Okay,
far as
yeah.
having progressive
Okay,
reforms,
progressive versus
Yeah.
conservative.
I'll have to define my terms. when I talk
Progressive
to you.
conservative
Yeah.
is
But it's smart state building. You know, smart again can be defined in many different ways. I'm not saying it's a good thing.
From a security
but
perspective.
but it's a smart. If you wanted to create a state and have allegiance, you know, it's a pretty smart thing to do,
Yeah.
to feed people a fantasy, right? That's what people want.
and a flag,
And
good
a flag. A good flag, always, you know.
I just want to. I know we weren't meant to go over 5 minutes, but I'm just going to put this out there because it's a personal story, and personal stories are interesting, right?
They are.
Very much.
So before I started at UCL, I was kind of like thinking, you know, what are my dissertation kind of things that I would be interested in doing? And one of the things I had on my mind, but I realised I didn't want to do it, but that's another story, was when I graduated from my undergrad, which was 12 years ago. Even though I look fresh-faced, I'm actually a very old man, and I graduated. And I graduated from my BA 12 years ago. And after I graduated, I went and lived in China for a year, and that was depressing and interesting at the same time. And it was a really amazing experience to actually live in a country like China, and not just go to Hong Kong for the weekend or Beijing or whatever.
Sure.
To actually live in industrial China for a year was pretty mind blowing. Then around 5 years later, I was lucky enough to live one of my dreams, which was tour America with a band, and we played, I can't remember, 20 gigs in 24 days, all across America. And anyway, I was shocked by how similar those two countries were. I've never seen so many flags as I've seen in America and in China. I've never seen such love and devotion to a nation. Like in Britain, certainly in London it's a bit closed, but there's a certain amount of love for British history and stuff, but compared to America and compared to China, where they both think like this is the best nation in the world, we've got an amazing history, we've got the best story to tell, we've got to spread that around the world, our money is the best, our art's the best, our literature's the best, those two parallel stories I find so interesting. That China is communist, America is capitalist, they're polar opposites, and yet essentially they're the
last
same
two surviving
country.
big examples of that.
And I wanted to study historically how that emerged. I realised it was a bit pie in the sky kind of thinking, but it is a thing that I realised in America is like it's so patriotic and like devotion. It's like godlike devotion in America, and that is going back to gun control. Is like the reason people believe so firmly they should be allowed to kill people effectively.
Hey man, we're two hegemons, right?
Well,
China,
right?
The last two big polar opposite runs like that, right? If you think about what we've gone through, but
That's crazy. Sorry, you said about the flags and all that.
Yeah.
I went back to Iran last summer, and I couldn't. The amount of flags everywhere you went, like
Right.
that's
Is that
one of the things.
a more recent
It
development?
is actually. I believe it is. Usually you go everywhere you go, get a picture of their mum in airports everywhere, and then the president. But the flag issue, I even said it to my dad. I said, everywhere you look, see flags everywhere. Like whether it be coming out of a restaurant or coming out of the park, coming out of the cinema, it was plastered everywhere. And I don't know what the reason is. Whether it is like the patriotic side of it, or because I know they want to, they like to show that they're good, the big nation, they're the powerful one in the Middle East, etc. I'm not a historian, but
a regional hegemon.
Yeah.
But the flag is I think it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
The flag.
But just when you said that, I was like straight away. I was like, you know what? When I went to Iran last year, that's the first
things
thing I
have
noticed.
changed.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about the Iranian nuclear deal?
I'm not much of a nuclear person, but as
Your
far
perception
as,
as a citizen.
as a citizen, if it opens up the sanctions, which it will, I've got family over there, and it can only make it better. So I know earlier we touched on about how sanctioning the country. I think you touched on it. It's a good thing to have given or whatever you want to call it, but you saw the country suffer when they put them sanctions on.
It's been
man.
terrible
Big
for
time.
them.
Big time. Like whether it be from the price of a product or just even day-to-day life, trying to get things, it's crazy. My dad lives out there, and I went there, like I said, last summer. The price went from here to here. There's the quality of stuff has gone
What do you
down.
mean the price of everything, like bread or whatever?
Dude, you go out for a pizza, I could have converted it for a pizza, like 18 quid. It's like...
Is this
Let's
in Tehran?
talk about.
Tehran's quite expensive anyway.
Yeah.
But
Let's unpack that to a wider perspective, because there's been a lot of global concern about whether Iran is the greatest exporter of terror, according to some, whether, on another angle, we actually just need to think about diplomacy, rather than trying to label somebody, this or that. I mean, Kaneshka, you had some thoughts about the whole, we were talking about the other day, about the whole Iran deal and the whole perspective of Iran in the wider scheme of things.
We mentioned in the car as well, and how Iran is so badly misrepresented in the media, and that makes the whole picture very, very flawed. And let's start with the fact that Iran was never even close to having a nuclear.
30% levels of enriched, uranium. You need something at least 80-90% plus for a weapon.
Bomb grade,
Weapons grade, correct?
Yeah.
So, the fact that they had centrifuges and so on is one thing, but the fact that they weren't even close to having a weapon is another.
What are they limited to? Like now or something.
Yeah, very little.
Yeah.
4%, I think, is the exact number. You know, and then you get Netanyahu going in front of, you
I think
know,
that we
the
spoke
American legislative bodies pleading. But then you also have to consider what's the number one lobby in America in domestic politics, the Israel lobby. Yeah. So there's angles there. But back to what you were saying, sorry.
Yes. Well, we never really knew how close they are to having a nuclear weapon. Apparently,
Lack
they
of
were
trans-
very-
lack of
Lack
transparency.
of transparency, definitely. And this Ayatollahs, yes, they're a bunch of radicals, but sometimes they behaved more pragmatic than Western leaders.
Yeah.
They showed like bunch of crazy bastards who one morning would wake up and bomb and throw a nuclear bomb into Israel. But how do you imagine this? Would they ever do that? But of course, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
The main argument that I think that sort of cuts the middle of the line is that as a regional hegemon, which Iran clearly is, I think just having the ability to proliferate, not even having a weapon, but being able to be in a position where they could gain a weapon was just a matter of political power that many people, for better or worse, were saying or concerned about them being able to do, you know? And I think that's the middle line. It's not that they're going to wake up in the morning and say, we're going to really wipe Israel off the face of the map. Yeah? I mean, let's talk about Israel. They're the only country...
I want to say I disagree about this. I don't think it was anything to do with whether they could or couldn't produce a weapon.
Okay, and why?
It was just purely going back to what I said originally about Leo Strauss and the neoconservatives. It's a lot easier to create a fantasy about a nation than it is to produce any evidence or anything. So therefore, we say Iran is scary. Be scared of Iran, and everyone's suddenly scared of Iran.
And Israel used that one comment that president made.
But here's where I'm getting, but the fact is I don't think Israel has anything to worry about because they're the only country in the world that at least is allied with, you know, Western powers that doesn't declare.
I don't think it's even about Israel.
Right,
or
any other country, because the U.S. deploys about 1,750 warheads right now. Do you really think they're worried about what Iran's going to do?
No, but I don't think it's anything to do with real world fears or concerns.
Oh, okay.
This is what I'm saying. I think it's purely like a national process to be elected. This is how you get elected. You make people scared. You say, we will defend you. And then you win power, and it's all about power. And
You mean
so
Western powers?
in
playing the game.
America, specifically in America.
Okay.
You know, you think about like how JFK got into power in 1960 was he basically said, be scared of communism. I will fight them harder because this other guy's not. He's done.
Part of it
You're
was
not going to be scared enough.
Yeah, part of it was being able to campaign about not being soft.
Yeah, okay, but it's about fear. This is my point. It's like the history of post-Second World War politics has been one about fear, developing
partly,
fear, and the Iranian story is like the classic example of fear. But Iraq as well. Iraq was like
Sure.
there was no
That I agree
evidence,
with, absolutely.
and we were just told this fantastical story about fear, and we bought it, and we went to war,
Absolutely.
and we didn't want to go to war, but we went to war, and Tony Blair destroyed his career.
That
in
was the
process.
number one. If you look at all the polls that were done in Congress, for example, that was the number one reason why they supported invasion was WMDs.
Yeah.
You know.
Fear.
Yeah.
Fear.
But I think I agree with you on the fear front because I think, you know, people say sex sells. I always argue, no, I think fear sells because even in advertising, when you think it's sex that's being sold, you know, and there's like, oh, look at this beautiful woman advertising this dress. Actually, it's not because she's beautiful. It's because it feeds into people's deep-seated fears that, like, if I don't have that dress, I won't look like that. You know,
I won't
it's
be
fear.
But
yeah.
Kanashka, I'm going to ask you. I mean, I always thought Israel had around 100 weapons. You were saying
It
300?
has more than 300, but we don't know.
That's
We don't
crazy.
know.
China has about 300. That makes them more
Experts say,
than
no,
China.
Israel is second after United States.
No, second after United States and Russia.
After the United States and Russia, of course.
Third,
yes,
yes.
It's
China,
third,
China,
sorry,
China
third.
has around 300. If they
Third.
have more than
No.
300,
China
that's
has-
crazy.
China has far less than.
So what does Israel really have to be fearful about? I mean, come on.
Nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing.
The thing,
Nothing.
going back to the point where, you know, I think I sent you the link, you know, the Israeli Prime Minister going,
Netanyahu.
the guy interviewer said to him, you know, why don't you call the president over and have a chat and see? No, because they said they're going to bomb us. I mean, that was said by a previous president anyway, and then of course they won't sit at the table again because he's just said that. Yeah, because they said they're going to wipe us off the face of the earth. Again, people hearing that again, it reminds them again about the fear and going, oh shit, yeah, all right. Okay, we have to do something about it. You know?
So let's talk about preemption. Let's talk about getting involved in any intervention, right? That's ever happened. I never forget being a teacher. Every single week we used to, on the Fridays, watch news clips with our kids. And in this case, it was some time ago, probably 2 years or so ago, on the Syrian civil war. And like 10,000 people have been killed. Now 225,000, fast approaching 250,000 people have died as a result of the conflicts surrounding not only the Islamic State, but of course the Assad regime and so on. And my kids were baffled because the story was on the fact that there was a curfew at night, that people couldn't go outside after 6 or so. And they were throwing each other bread from house to house to try to give each other food, because they went out in the streets, they'd be shot by the Assad regime.
When was that?
About 2 years ago or so. Then they
okay,
had
after
lockdown.
everything started.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, and there was lockdown at night. If they went out after a certain hour, they'd be killed by their own government. My kids asked a very simple question. They said, "How is this possible, and why aren't we doing anything about it?" And I said, "Well, I think the answer to that is somewhat complicated. You often have situations where the people who replace repressive regimes may be worse, or, for example, regime change, back to our first topic in Afghanistan, like as you guys were saying, was perhaps unforeseen of the aftermath. In Iraq, for example, it's a crazy topic."
But what do we know, like, the news can portray any story at once, so it's like, is this valid?
That's what it's there for anyway. Isn't it?
But is it valid?
But I don't think it's
evidence?
debatable that whether, this has been completely verified by UN study, that, the Assad regime has killed at least several hundred people with, for example, what kind of gas was it? What kind of gas was used?
When?
It was a chemical.
Was it chemical?
The recent
I believe so. They
Zareen.
used chemical weapons.
It wasn't sarin, no.
The last year when apparently they crossed the line, when Obama, you mean this crisis?
And I think also recently, again, it's just come out that's just happened again. But yeah, also the same type of agent that was used then. That's pretty verified, I think. That's been verified by several different independent bodies that was at least used. You know what I mean? It's a complicated situation.
But not by Assad regime.
Certainly their weapons.
There have been
certainly,
research that actually proved that this is chemical.
Was from someone else?
It was not. It could be followed back not to Assad regime but to Turkey.
Interesting.
That's interesting
Yeah.
because
which
it's
has nothing
complicated.
which has nothing to do with Assad regime.
But it happened, I think, absolutely within this geographic space of Syria.
Yeah, it happened in Syria. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And was used by certainly pro-government, if not government forces, who Iran support, right?
That's
Which
not
is-
proven.
You don't. So who does Iran support then in the battle
No.
against IS?
The gas was used by the Assad.
But I think it's proven that Iran supports pro-Assad forces,
Oh yeah, of course.
Shia groups in
Yes.
Iraq,
Yes.
right?
Yes, of course.
It's a
definitely.
complicated
Yeah,
situation,
yeah,
which is,
yeah.
when you think about intervention, whether you're dealing with IS or anything else, the one thing that ticks me off is destroying incredible ancient, ruins of the
Whatever
Persian
we
Empire.
can say about, I'm sorry for interrupting. Whatever we can
Yeah.
say about Assad regime, before all this mess started, it was a wonderful country, believe it or
It was.
not.
It was. Absolutely.
I don't know a country in Middle East where
Yeah.
Jews, Christians, and
Yep.
Muslims lived so peacefully in Syria under Assad regime than any time else.
I know.
For God's sake, Prime Minister was an Coptic Christian.
Coptic Christian, which gets my point.
Yes.
There was an issue, perhaps people started to become involved, and it's maybe only accentuated it.
What changed?
200, nearly 250,000 people dead, I
What
think.
changed? Certain groups were supported by international community, again by Turkey, by Israel, by United
By
States.
United States, absolutely.
Those who were against Assad. But the problem was that
Yeah.
part of them were radical Islamists,
Yeah.
also supported by Saudi Arabia.
One of the groups is pretty much a branch of Al Qaeda.
Yes, Jabhat
Okay.
al-Nusra. Jabhat al-Nusra, which has been supported by Turkey directly. Turkey, which is member of NATO.
And my point is, I get it. Everyone sees sort of people facing adversity or societies that have a supposed endurance for violence and say, let's do something. But then you think, man, there's a lot of other things at play that are unforeseen or completely, unknown to the general public.
Exactly. One of the things I think is the gas issue. That gas could be transferred from Iran to Europe through Syria. And they knew that they need good relations or no relation at all with Assad regime to get it done. Similarly with Libya, exactly same story.
Yeah.
it was also a wonderful country.
Yep.
Under Gaddafi,
Gaddafi,
we like
absolutely.
it or not. Under
Wealthy.
Gaddafi, it had the highest living standards in Africa. Well, to reach highest living standards in Africa, you need to do lots of hard work, and that work was done by Gaddafi government. You like it or not, that's a fact.
Absolutely. I know. And now you've got UNESCO
Yes.
complaining that
And
they're.
now you have Libya, a country as a failed state. It's no country anymore.
Wow.
There is everywhere where oil is pumped out is like it's a separate territory guarded by Blackwater soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
This is very complicated.
And
yes.
UNESCO is declaring that the Islamic State is erasing the history of the world by destroying all these things. So that's an angle people will say.
We've been doing that since the dawn of time.
Absolutely. You just go to the British
Every
Museum.
civilization has. Though,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Quite
the story of
goes round,
history.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
You'll go to the
Right,
British
right.
Museum. You'll see the Parthenon frieze. There's a flyer there which explains why it is completely okay that the
Yeah.
British government has taken this under Lord Elgin, right?
Yeah.
And placed it there, and why we're doing a much better job of taking care of it than where it originally came from. You know, which is the same thing, more or less. You know, they cracked up and brought it all over, and now it's
Roman
here.
ruins. We walk around Rome and we look at that stuff and it didn't weather over the course of time. It wasn't like the rain destroyed it. People knocked it down and built other stuff with it. I mean,
Yeah.
this is just what happens. I mean,
Yeah, things
it's
erase
not
the ground.
good. It'd be lovely to keep hold of all this stuff for the rest of the time so we could look at it and go, ooh, isn't that nice? But the fact is, this isn't like specific to the radical Islam or
Yeah.
anything like this. It's just yet another part of my story of this
Yeah.
fantasy ghost of radical Islam. That it's there, it's out there. I'm not denying it's there. It's not a real thing that needs to be addressed. But is it really the defining feature of the world in which we live? No, not at all.
I
They're
think
actually smuggling a lot of it. Like it's the crime terror nexus. You know, they need to
Right.
fund themselves, so they're not actually destroying that much.
They're selling it
Daesh
on
is
the
selling
black
it.
market.
Yeah.
let's talk about Wahhabism. That's one thing a lot of people
Wahhabism.
won't know about. I mean, if you want to go ahead and
Wahhabism, also called Salafism.
yep.
Some
Sorry,
call
it's
it-
my accent. Wahhabism.
Yeah, some call it Takfiri Islam, which originally it was created by British Empire to fight the Ottomans in the region.
Mhm.
In 1920s,
After the collapse of the empire.
Yes, where you also movie The Lawrence of Arabia. Something in those lines,
Regions.
Yeah.
in those regions. Yes,
But the connections today are fascinating.
connections are there. So basically, what it is a cultist, a very cultist, violent. I wouldn't say branch of Islam. It's a cult.
That's what we were saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is a cult.
It's pretty much a cult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a cult which until 1960s did not have any influence
was
other
dormant.
than in desert of Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia.
Very dormant from a global perspective.
Yeah. But suddenly, these couple of radical cultists,
Qutb,
yes,
mainly.
mainly Qutb, yes, this couple of radical cultist Salafists got control of a region with some of the biggest oil reserves in the world. And these cultist group of cultist people had billions of dollars of petrodollars and support of the United States and other Western countries to whom they sold their
Of
oil.
course. That were energy dependent in that sense.
They were energy dependent. And they were able to promote this so-called religion throughout the rest of the world.
Do you think it's a form of soft power?
Great question.
So
Great question.
That-
I love it.
I wouldn't say it's soft. It's proper hard power where money is paid when.
But
On a
perhaps
cultural level, because I had a discussion in Ethiopia actually with a taxi driver. He was Muslim, and he was complaining about how Saudi export this form of Islam, and a lot of Ethiopian Muslims sort of think it's the purest form of Islam, and they start changing their cultural practices. And he was like, we have a beautiful form of Islam in Ethiopia. We're just as old a culture as they are.
Sure. large Christian population too.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, absolutely. But I just thought that was an interesting perspective on it because it sort of penetrates at a cultural level as well.
Yes, it tries to penetrate on the cultural level, but usually it uses hard power. It funds radical groups, pays lots of money, and
masjids and
Schooling
yes, schooling.
as well.
Schooling.
Schools is
Yeah.
the big
First
thing.
thing they do, set up
Set up
militias.
school, yeah.
Everywhere they go, first they set up militias. Yes,
And it's all Saudi funded, right?
yeah, it's all Saudi funded. It's all there are facts that there is this prince.
Oh wow, what's his name?
Prince Bandar,
Is that his name?
who in one or the other way controls and has relations with every radical terrorist organization in the world.
That's right, yeah.
Prince Al-Bandar, who was recently the defense minister in Saudi Arabia. The guy, previous that, lived 12 years in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So what? Did he control all these terrorist movements from Washington, D.C.? That's a question.
It's like
Rhetorical,
the Bin Laden thing, you know.
The
It's like Bin
yeah.
Laden was the easy face. We killed him, but Al Zawahiri, you know, he is the real
Zawahiri,
like
yeah.
what would you say, like the cultural sort of leader of
The cultural brains behind the
of
operation.
Al Qaeda.
yeah. The
Bin
higher
Laden
one.
was the money man essentially.
Absolutely.
And it's ironic that, you know, Bin Laden post 9/11 was like the bad guy. We killed him, and yay, everything's great.
a figurehead, a perceived
Yeah,
figurehead.
but actually,
It's a much wider problem.
You know, yeah. Or it's not even a wider problem. The problem was never him in the first place. He was just the money guy.
But people
'Cause he
obviously
was
associate
incredibly rich.
they associate that as the bullseye, but actually there's probably something much.
Yeah, I mean, if it's
Grander.
even, I think Al Qaeda's a way smaller thing than
Yeah,
than
well,
we
especially
think
now,
it is.
but-
I think it's really tiny. That's my perception of it.
It concerns me that people don't discuss, you know, for example, the problems in the Horn of Africa. You know, that's not discussed much. I mean, talk about killing kids in school. You know, it seems to be.
Guess we could do a part 2 or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not
Yeah,
go
sorry.
to the Horn of Africa.
Final topic then. Space.
Space.
The final frontier.
The final frontier. Well, space, obviously, I've had quite a bit of experience in space. Space is an interesting one. There's loads of different aspects to it.
What did you tell James when you met him, Mr.
Who's
Bond?
James?
Mr.
Oh.
Which James? James Bond?
Yeah, Q Branch, right?
Q Branch.
Did I
Yeah,
get
yeah,
that
yeah,
right?
yeah. That's right. That is right. Well, space, there's two different sides of space. There's obviously the exploration, there's the science side, right? And that is super cool, and that really doesn't cost as much percentage of taxpayers' money as people like to complain about. You know, in the US, I think it's like less than $1 each person, and I think what we get from it in terms of knowledge is fantastic. Planetary science, astronomy.
If you haven't gotten on Twitter, go follow NASA. It's one of the
Yeah,
best
it's.
things you can
I
do.
mean, great.
Amazing.
What I think their social media is one of the best social media.
I agree. That's why I signed up for Twitter.
Yeah.
I was like, man, you know, you get to follow Castro and NASA. That's all I'm interested in.
NASA is awesome.
That's all I'm interested in.
But then there's the space application side, which is basically low Earth orbit. It's all our satellites.
Yep.
And people don't realize how reliant we've become on space. And one of the best questions I had was posed to me by this space scientist, and he was like, hey kids, what do you think would happen if we switched space off for the day? And everyone was like, oh, I don't know, nothing. He's like, you know, he showed all the scenarios, like literally nothing would work. You know, we become so reliant. And space brings, it brings so much to our technology, to the way we can communicate, to the way we can like deliver medicine, medical relief in war zones, you know, monitor the environment, you know, our agricultural farming. But obviously there's the security side.
Track Malaysian flight that disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, Inmarsat UK company did a huge amount in trying to.
What have you heard about that?
No more than you guys. I mean,
Really?
everyone worked very, very hard. There's lots of different theories.
That's crazy though. Like something like the movie, it's like disappeared, done.
Southern Indian Ocean for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
I
seems
mean,
likely.
all the different like routes they've planned out, everything that all the eventualities they thought about, it can only really be the South Indian
Is it
Ocean.
until
side.
they find that black box?
Yeah, I mean, there was something on this weekend. I don't know if you saw it. It was like at the bottom of my news feed. They found some debris and they were on an island and they were going
absolutely.
to
weren't sure if it
investigate.
was exactly that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't follow it up, but you know,
But-
there's too
but-
much news.
But clearly, there's a wider area of challenge where, as you said, in this information revolution, things can be lost and won,
Yeah.
gained and created. You
Yeah,
know, in
yeah.
a dimension that we've perhaps was never foreseen.
Yeah.
You know, Reagan thought he had shit figured out with Star Wars. Get out of here, son. You know what I mean? We were talking about this in the car. I mean, think about the size of objects that will be up there with nanotechnology and beyond. People think, I don't know, what's a satellite? How big is a satellite?
It depends. I mean, there's small, there's large, but I mean...
And they're getting smaller is my
Yeah,
point,
yeah, yeah.
right? So the thing is, like, can we track things that are this small? Can we track things that are smaller yet? I mean, people have... I was in a security Raytheon conference this year, and that was one of the big topics was, let's talk about the size of things and the amount of them that are actually up there that, for example, we don't
Yeah.
really ever think about whether or not we'll be able to actually have decent intelligence
Yeah.
on.
On the one hand, it's great because it's lower cost. You know, it means like small states that don't have a lot of money can launch satellites. Like Ethiopia's now talking about it. They're really into space.
To become a hegemon in space, right?
Yeah, they want to be one of the 5 African spacefaring nations. Like, it's great, really positive, and they've invested in some space centers, science centers, you know, for Ethiopian students. But yes, in terms of like the space security region, space law is just so behind. We still rely on the Outer Space Treaty, which is like 1960s, you know?
Is there going to be another like Geneva Convention on the internet and that? And all that? Remember they were talking about that at the conference, right?
Yeah. The internet, I think, is like, I think space needs an updated legal framework for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the internet, people can't even calculate cyber risk for insurance, you know? I don't think we're going to get to a
Well,
convention.
Bitcoin went up in Greece, what, 10 times?
Yeah.
You know, like 2 weeks ago or whatever, or 3 weeks ago?
That is so
I should
interesting.
never have spent my bitcoins.
Did you really? Were you mining? Were you mining them as well?
No, I was spending them on things. But anyway.
Listen, are you bringing a book out?
But-
I don't know what your publisher's going to say, man. The poor guy's trying to get his...
I mean, do you ever work on missile defense and stuff like that?
I don't work directly in missile defense, no. But I've certainly, in
Maybe
terms
she
of
does.
what angle of missile
I don't know, I'm
defense.
just fascinated because, I mean, for example, I know Obama pulled the missile shield from Poland as a controversial issue. I mean, we talk about the Russian politics and foreign policy and NATO 1,000 years east expansion, what, 20 years, Kaneshko, roughly? NATO's gone. But now he's placed most of the missile defense in ships in international waters through the Aegis system. I mean, because obviously it's a little bit more,
Yeah.
slightly less, he's a defensive realist, right? He's going to
Yeah.
try to at least keep the options on the table, but back them off from invading too much geopolitical controversy. Is space going to be that next step, do you think?
It's already happening in space, and also like maritime and space is very interlinked, you know? I mean, a lot of like maritime tracking and anti-missile tracking. Yeah, you might have ground stations, but that's all for space, you know?
That's kind of my point.
So, yeah, I
But
mean...
the platform is most interestingly actually in international waters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Most
International waters, Jesus, that's a whole other legal ball game, you know? Like, I was just reading, like, someone died on a cruise ship in international waters, and the family were completely at a loss with what to do, you know? Because there's no legal framework to support you in international
Absolutely.
waters.
You know, I mean, over 50% of U.S. nuclear weapons are on subs in international waters, and about 15 years, 70%.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they spent $370 billion on the Ohio class sub replacement scheme,
Yeah.
which of course the UK's renewed Trident, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
We're the only country in the world that shared with it. I mean, are you baffled? Do you think there's a special relationship, being a double citizen,
Especially...
between the UK and America?
I mean, obviously, I have my own perspective because I'm very proud of both. You know, it's part of my history. It's part of my family's history. In terms
You're a
of
dual
special-
passport holder, right?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I consider myself a Londoner, I guess, but special relationship. Yes, there is to a degree. You know, we share similar goals, but I think the US just it's like full gung ho. You know, Britain has a different world history, and we're definitely not the player we were.
Can I just say I'm proud of neither. I'm English. You know, I was born and raised in London,
Yeah.
and my parents were born and raised in
Yeah,
London. I'm Jewish. My great grandparents came from Eastern Europe, I suppose, but we don't know where. You know. But I have no pride whatsoever in British history. We've done awful, horrible, terrible things to the world. I think London is an amazing city. I love living here, and I'm definitely proud of living in London. But I look around me and I see the votes for UKIP go up, and I see, I see right-wing fascism on the rise, and I see anti-immigration everywhere, and there's nothing to be. I mean, I am not proud, and I feel like if I was American, I would.
Would you be embarrassed?
I wouldn't be embarrassed, no. But
Are you embarrassed to have me as your friend?
No, it's all right. I can allow one American. In
That's
my
what he
life.
told me when we first met. He was like, you're pretty cool, man. We'll whatever. I
For
can
an
probably,
American.
pretty cool for an American. Yeah, something like that. Go on, sorry.
So it's not pride.
Are you a
right?
citizen of the world?
No, not at all. I'm a Londoner.
Didn't Michael Jackson?
I love that. See, all Londoners say the same thing.
I'm
I'm
a Londoner.
a Londoner. No, but no, I understand what you're saying, and I think a lot of people would share that opinion. And
Yeah,
I think there's
I
difference.
certainly do.
There is a difference between pride and patriotism as well. It's all definitions, right? Like some people are proud of their family history. You know, like my family's from East London. This is where we are. I'm really proud of being in East London. Or like, you know, my dad's family all from Brooklyn. They're really proud of being Brooklyners. They've all had very different political opinions, supported different presidents, vote for different people.
Absolutely.
You know, so.
You know, my grandparents came over from Europe after I remember my grandfather was an engineer who built bridges in the Netherlands, and by day he was contracted by Nazis to do their work, and by night worked with the Dutch underground to blow them up. And my other grandfather was an officer in the Axis Navy. You know what I mean? On two opposite spectrums, right? They both immigrated after the war through Ellis Island. You can go there and see their names on the wall, and you know, and our family's intermarried. You know, and I'm proud of the overcoming of adversity that my grandparents went through, you know what I mean? But I don't necessarily root that in one area geographically and say I'm only having allegiance to this area, you know?
How about you though? That I think yours is.
Yeah,
the
yours
most
is
Yeah,
yours is the
yours
most
is
interesting.
Is there pride? Do you consider yourself Afghan or
Or
what?
Dutch.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a serious identity issue. So I have no freaking idea who I am. I think in 3 different languages if
Yeah.
I ever think. So it's really
Would you say you're all
complicated.
rounder?
Yes.
Like
yes,
a bit of everything.
Yes, yes,
If someone from
yeah.
Afghanistan.
I feel at home here in London, so
Yeah.
I'm in
I do as
process
well.
of becoming a Londoner as well.
See, that's the same for me. Like when I moved up from Iran, obviously I've never been through the same experience that you have. But like people go to me, what are you, Iranian, England? Well, obviously, clearly I'm half and half. But yeah, I love living in London, but I'd also like a house in Iran just to go
Yeah.
and visit, you know, see the family, enjoy the life out there. You know, that's
But
what
If
We
you
live-
had a second house, where would it be then?
The second house.
Who wants
you
3
could-
houses?
Okay.
Michigan,
But you can
obviously.
only afford 2. One in London and one in.
One would be somewhere in Siberia.
Oh, okay.
Really?
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 Yeah,
Is that going to be in the book?
Cool.
I think.
Is that in the book?
Hopefully it
About
will.
why you-
It'll be in the introduction, right?
We're around Baikal because
Go-
I've been to Lake Baikal and it's beautiful.
Check out my
Okay.
GoFundMe.
Have you
I've
been
heard some
Baikal?
great things about it.
It is
Uh-huh.
wonderful, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I've been to Lake
yeah.
Baikal. We went snowmobiling on Baikal.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
I think we've got to get these guys back in again.
Dude, this is awesome, man.
I mean, for myself, I mean, my hat, I'm sweating here, man. Well, you guys really blew my mind away. You know, again, I'll let Chris do the outro here, but I've learned a hell of a lot, and I'd definitely love to have these guys back. Again, follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on our website. You can follow it down here whenever our producer guy puts it down here. Right, then? Yeah? Cool. Silent.
Asher, plug yourself, man. Plug your band. Plug everything.
Oh God, I don't want to plug myself. I hate
course you
plugging
can, man. Come
myself.
I hate plugging myself,
You're one
my
of the
bad. We travelled the US for 24
but that wasn't a
days or
plug,
whatever it
no.
was.
If you
One of the
want-
smartest guys I know.
You can check out our band Wide Skies. We're really good. But we're called Wide Skies, as in Wide Skies. We're playing Green Man Festival. I don't know if this show's out before the end of August, is it?
I don't know, is it?
It will be.
We will see.
It
If
will
it
be.
is,
It
come
will
and
be.
see us at Green Man Festival.
You just check out the guys wearing a bunch of tie-dye. He'll be with his hippie buddies and stuff, right? No?
Not at all.
Oh, man, I messed that up.
I'm no hippie.
Asher Nathan, you got a Twitter, man?
I don't do Twitter. I
You got
used
Facebook?
to. I got a Facebook, you know, but just whatever. Just find me in the work. Come down to UCL or come to the British Library, and I'll usually be there.
You'll be at an academic event soon, I'm sure, with me or something like that.
I don't know. I'll be at the British Library a lot,
Reading?
reading lots of books. Yes.
Sounds good. Kaneshko?
Well, I will be also C's library for the next 2 years. And
He's got his own desk with it's like a wall of books around it. I always walk down, I'm like, where the hell's Kaneshko? Oh yeah, he's probably hiding behind that wall.
well,
The British built castles, Kaneshko builds books.
This is what PhD people get paid to do. Read books.
Yeah, except I don't get paid. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But Platform Ukraine, check it out online, right?
Yes, please do.
It's a fantastic group that we're
Yes,
involved
yes,
with.
yes.
Anything else?
No, I'm delighted to be here. I enjoyed it to be actually.
We'd
It was
love to have you
wonderful.
back again.
It was wonderful, and thank you all. I enjoyed
We
it.
can
I had a
argue
great time.
again another time.
I definitely-
You can make me look ridiculous for 2 hours and dumb.
You
and
did all right.
did okay?
You did okay.
Okay.
You did brilliant.
Caitlin?
I won't be contactable, so I don't have any social media or anything like that.
Due
But
to the nature of your work. Yeah.
Just
yeah,
check
low
out.
profile.
Caitlin isn't even your real name.
But yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
I'd like to have you back talking about the MMA side a little bit. She does train sometimes.
Yeah, I
Nice
do.
of that, so
I
it'd
do.
be-
I
it'd
do
be good
train.
to, have you back.
He used to train under Upupada, his son, the K1 Raf, the Dutch, yeah, man. Perry Upada, yeah, his son. Crazy, huh? So
Next
we got-
episode, definitely.
Talk about being multicultural and citizens of the world. Martial arts is amazing. If
Yeah,
you haven't noticed
brings
that
everyone
already.
together.
It does.
Except me, I just play computer games.
We can get you into the UFC, computer game.
Yeah, oh yeah, there is one. I saw that PlayStation. Cool. I'll check it out.
There we go.
Guys, it's been amazing for myself, Chris, my co-host Dan, the gentleman Movahidi, Asher Nathan, Kaneshko Sangar, Caitlin Eager, Chris Hoekstra signing out. You guys have been fantastic. Tune in next time. We'll be back, I'm sure, the three of us again to chat more. There's so many things we didn't get to today.
And the man behind the camera.
Dean John,
Sorry, how is it? His video, his radio voice.
Dean John, amazing producer, the greatest of all time. We love you. This is The Other Side.
Peace.
Peace.